Hello world, hello internet, hello people with perhaps an unhealthy interest in congressional mechanics. We're here to talk about representation. That's what it says on the slide, and so that's probably what I should do. This fits into the wider scheme of congressional, don't know what that's about, congressional roles and duties, because they've got three. They legislate, they've got oversight and scrutiny, and they've got representation. Now, this is probably the easiest of those particular three. Which makes it rather odd that this is my third or fourth attempt to record this. I'm not quite sure why I keep getting it wrong. Perhaps it's just me trying to be as clear as possible. But anyway, enough about that. Let's push on. Congress and representation. Congress, of course, is bicameral, and so that raises the question of to what extent is this representation business shared across the two things evenly, or perhaps you might say symmetrically / asymmetrically. Well, on a symmetrical sense, both houses are subject to direct election. You might consider that to be extraordinarily unremarkable until you bear in mind that senators were originally supposed to be appointed by their state legislatures. That didn't change until 1913 with the passage of the 17th Amendment. What does this do? Well, it demonstrates that initially the concerns of the Founding Fathers were spread equally between tyranny of government and tyranny of the majority. You'll remember that there are aspects of the American Constitution and the American system that are anti-democratic. Well, this is one of them, although it was evidently corrected. So concerns here at the very, very outset about the rule of the mob as much as the rule of the government. Never mind, that's now through. We don't have to worry about that anymore. There are other anti-democratic aspects of the Constitution that you do need to consider, but right now, when it comes to Congress, both houses are subject to direct election. However, that is as close as it gets to being similar, because after that, everything goes to pot. Constituencies vary dramatically, not just between the Senate and the House of Representatives, but also within the Senate itself. The Senate, of course, is divided into states, and the population of the state will vary between 39 million people in California and 600,000 in Wyoming. 600,000 people, several more very, very nervous cattle. Now, each of those will get two senators, and so there is a question about representation there. How on earth can that work if you've got two senators for 39 million and two for 60 million? The situation, unfortunately, is no clearer in the House, where your average population, your average district is represented by your average representative, represents 710,000 people. Now, just by way of comparison, you should remember that the average constituency in the UK will be decided by 70,000 voters. There'll be about 120,000 souls, but in the UK, you're looking at a factor of about a tenth of the size of a congressional district for an MP. Again, it varies dramatically. Montana only gets one representative. They get two senators, they get one representative, and that one representative stands for 994,000 people. Yeah, quite. On the other hand, Rhode Island, again, one district, one state. The state represents one district, and that is 527,000 people. So we've got a huge variation in the size of those constituencies, both within the House and between the houses. So there's an asymmetry there all over the place. Makes things very, very complicated. The electoral schedule also differs. The Senate, 2 years. The Senate 6 years, the House 2 years. But remember that this operates on a rolling 2-year schedule. So 1/3 elected at every 2 years. And that is important. Remember that, because that comes up later. So you might want to make a note of that. Okay, so this is Congress and representation. Symmetries, asymmetries should be fairly straightforward. Let's move on and look into this in a little bit more detail. We're going to look at the House first. We're going to look at the benefits of the House system and the disadvantages of the House system. Greater accountability. We've got smaller constituencies. Remember, 700,000 people, and we've got shorter terms, 2 years. Add that to the fact that the Congress, your representative doesn't have to worry about advice and consent. Remember, these are treaties and appointments, and that is an exclusive power of the Senate. And given this, they've got no excuse for not focusing on local issues. Local issues here are where it is all about. That's absolutely evident. So should be a much greater degree of representation here. However, we've got gerrymandering. And with gerrymandering, lovely little video clip that kind of follows that explains how one of the problems with gerrymandering is that here you've got a system whereby the representatives choose their voters. Democracy should be the other way around. The voters should be choosing their representatives. But with gerrymandering, that is turned on its head. And what that does is that it undermines equal representation. And if you follow that link, it brings you to this particular page, which is a lovely article from the Washington Post, which goes into the gerrymandering issue in great detail. Now, there are thousands of articles out there about gerrymandering, and Mr. Barker and I have looked at a lot of them. This one I particularly like, and one of the reasons I like it is that it makes a very, very important point here. The important point about gerrymandering is not so much about winning seats for your party as it is about shafting the opposition. What we're doing here is that we cram all of the opponents' seats into safe seats. All of the opposition votes we want to seek to push together in small clumps, and of course we can see that when we look at the stupid shapes here. So we got that one. This is the praying. This one here is obviously the praying mantis. Blah 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 blah. Lots of really, really good stuff overall in this particular article. But it does drag you towards a video right here at the bottom, which I strongly urge that you watch. I'm not going to embed it here because I can't, but do look at that video. It is very, very good indeed. So that's gerrymandering, and that undermines equal representation. The other thing that's going on in the House is that we've got the constant campaign. Remember, the entire House is kicked out every 2 years, except it's not kicked out because of the advantages of incumbency. Rather, every 2 years, every representative has to go back to the voters and say, please vote for me. And of course, that makes it a very, very expensive process. And where you've got expense, you open the door to interest groups, specifically to these special interest groups that seek to influence policy through all sorts of different ways. So the constant campaign is a huge issue in the House. Let's move across the corridor and have a look at the Senate. One of the great things about a state is that you can't gerrymander a state. Each state gets 2 representatives in the Senate, and you can't gerrymander that. You don't have to in the case of Wyoming, when it's just 600,000 people and lots of scared cattle. But never mind, there we go. So states cannot be gerrymandered, and they've got longer terms, which should make them, insulate them to an extent from the constant campaign and the pressing demands of interest groups. However, we have that issue of uneven representation. 2 senators for 39 million in California, 2 senators for 0.6 million in Wyoming. Barking. And then they've got the issue of national distractions. They've got the advice and consent, the agreeing to presidential treaties and agreeing to presidential nominations to the Supreme Court and to senior positions within the executive. And the electoral schedule, yeah, okay, it's every 6 years, but every 2 years, a third of the Senate's up. So we've got that rolling schedule, and that means that while individual senators might be safe for 6 years, every 2 years madness does descend upon the Senate as people scrabble around for cash to fight their campaigns. So while we've got that 6-year term which insulates them up to a point, at any given time, a third of the chamber is going to be up for election, and so there's always going to be that opportunity for interest groups to get in and stir things up and influence things their way and get in the way of even representation. Problems common to both chambers. This is fairly straightforward. It's all about the squeezed middle and polarization, and we've covered this elsewhere. This is driven by the importance of primaries and of course, trial by media within that role of primaries. Campaign finance, I've sort of alluded to that already. Soft money is going to be about party influence. Hard money is going to be about SPIG influence. And that's leading to this big issue of iron triangles. And I'm going to kick iron triangles into Unit 3. Hurrah! We'll probably cover it at some point. But iron triangles are about the way in which pressure groups can dig into the policy-making process and essentially decouple particular interests from wider national concerns. That probably doesn't make any sense right now, but don't worry, it will do. When we come to see the old iron triangle, you will know exactly what we are talking about. And I look forward to discussing that and any questions you have when next we meet in class. I'll see you then. Bye now.